the class is going on, you can write your questions, and please write it down or note it down or write it in the chat box so that we can actually get to it when we are ready to take the questions. So let's wait for another 2 minutes and we'll start the class at exactly 5:05. Thank you. Okay, so let's start the class today. And our speaker, or should I say facilitator today, is by name Busayo Oluwadamilare Morakinyo, who is popularly known as BOM, B-O-M. He's an insulted passion. He has an insolent passion for nation building and social impact. He has a background in history and international relations, and master's degree in humanitarian and refugee studies. He leads community engagement at Connected Development and emerging social accountability that seeks to improve service delivery from public servants. Busayo believes civil obligation is a crux of civil rights and daily encourage active citizenry through its Pan-African engagement. Please shall we welcome to the microphone today, BOM, Mr. Busayo.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? Good afternoon or evening, everyone.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I would request for a moment. I need to set up. I just realized that I do not have have a Zoom app on my computer. I actually changed computers, so I would just request for a few moments to get that up on my computer so that I can be able to share my screen for my slides, because my slides are on my computer. Would that be fine?
It's fine, sir. It's fine. It's fine.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
It's fine,
much.
Sir. You're welcome.
I could help you share if you want, sir.
You don't have.
Hello, Mr. Busai, are you there? While we wait for Mr. Busayo to get himself sorted, Once again, I want to welcome you all to the class, and I want to say that please write your names down in the chat box, and please remember, you cannot leave before the end of the lectures. You cannot leave, because it is at the end that the names that we capture at the end is the name that will be deemed registered for the class. If you leave before the end, it does not count as attendance. You have to stay through the class to stay till the end. Please, if at some point network takes you off, please join back and we would have you till the end. Please. Thank you. Just give Mr. Buta a few moments as he prepares himself.
Hi guys.
You're welcome back, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have this totally set up yet, but let's just begin while I try to get this fully set up. Basically, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I just realized that this is the ninth. This is the ninth cohort of the Electoral College, speaking about polytracy, as it were. So I mean, and it's always been a pleasure to always come back, to. Okay, always come back to this class again and again with different people. I see we have about 42 people, so it means that this is more than an experiment rather now. It's an experience, so to speak. Great. I always come back here to talk about the same thing every time, and it's always interesting because that's my field, advocacy and policy influencing. And I feel that if every citizen can have that understanding of advocacy as it's supposed to be, and if every citizen can actually engage government in terms of government's policy and how these policies affect our everyday society, then we can be able to adequately make progress within the system we find ourselves in, and no matter how you see that system, that's the system we operate in Nigeria. It's definitely going to get better when we do more than just talking alone. So I don't know if Lisa is on. Lisa, if you have my slides, I would really appreciate if you have my slides so that I can jump on the slides straight up. Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Lisa, you're the MVP. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I also want to apologize because my class was supposed to be a long time ago, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was actually out of immediate reach, but we're here today, and we're going to get on that pretty soon. So yeah, we'll start advocacy and policy influencing. I mean, if this is not important, clearly, I don't think that would be having this conversation if it's not important. So it means that, yes, it's actually really, really important for us to have this conversation. And so I always want to start with the goal of the class. The goal is to strengthen the advocacy and policy influencing skills of participants for effective engagement with policymakers and duty bearers. Two things that come strongly: policymakers, and secondly, duty bearers. I mean, I think everybody should know who a policymaker is and who a duty bearer is. A duty bearer is probably someone within, the ambit of the law who bears responsibility for what, when, and how, basically. And if you look at this carefully, you would realize that when we talk about duty bearers, we're talking about the people we love to hate. Most times, these people are the politicians, the people we either choose to represent us or the people that are chosen to represent us. Anyway, the pendulum, swings through. Okay, yeah, I got my computer on now. Yeah, so Lisa, let me just switch to my computer so that it's easier, please.
All right, sir, sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. Yep. Lisa, please, can you permit me to unmute myself? I think I can't unmute myself here. Can you permit me to do that?
Okay. What's the name, sir? Okay, Busayo, right? For your computer. Okay.
Yes.
Maureen, can you please make him co-host? Maureen, are you there? Okay, she has done that. You can unmute now, sir. Thank you, Maureen.
Yes, I see. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We can very well, sir.
Can you confirm if you can hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
We can hear you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I was speaking about who a duty bearer is. I mean, it's really interesting when we understand that in a democracy, the majority always carries the vote. So no matter, and I think we've had probably various other people have been able to take us through this course around political participation and how that people get into political offices from our votes, and all of those interesting stuff. And so, yeah, it becomes a little bit interesting when people get into public offices, not because you voted for them, but because other people voted for them, right? So what it means is, whether we like it or not, no matter who we support or not support, someone is definitely going to become a duty bearer. And it's quite unfortunate that most often than not, majority carries the votes, as is typical of every political system. And so a duty bearer may be that person you never liked. A duty bearer may be, that person, you have not, you do not prefer. The duty bearer may be someone who is not the popular candidate. But the moment that person wins an election, the person becomes a duty bearer. Like the name implies, the person is supposed to be responsible for whatever policy directions, the person is supposed to ensure that what the citizens want, what would guide the citizens into prosperity, into achievement, into attainment, is what is experienced, as it were. Now, yeah, so that's that for our goal. I think the next thing I'll probably want to talk about is the definitions. Can you guys see my screen? Am I the only one seeing my screen? Can you guys see my screen, please? Oh, someone is saying we can't. Oh, so sorry.
No, we're just seeing you, sir.
You're just seeing me, not my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Let me share screen. So sorry. So sorry. I'm really, really sorry for this. Lisa, I'll still have to come back. I'll still have to come back to you. Still have to help me, share my slides again, please. So we don't take too much time. So sorry, guys. Really, really.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, Lisa, thank you very much. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Okay, yeah, let's look at what advocacy is. So I'll break down advocacy, I'll break down policy influencing, and so that would rush up. So advocacy is about challenging those in authority to make decisions and change policies, programs, and plans in such a way that they are fair, equitable, and favor the disadvantaged and powerless people. Two words that comes out strong from this definition is that these plans and programs should be fair and equitable, very important, and favor the disadvantaged people. Advocacy is also about speaking up and drawing attention of government officials about an issue or a problem that affects the community. Now, when we talk about community, we're not necessarily talking about where you live. It may be your demography, it may be your age group, it may be your your sphere of influence, your workspace. So when you talk about community, don't just look at community from around where you live. It could be your various levels of engagement and interactions, basically. So advocacy is also about causing public debate and most importantly, finding solutions that would lead to a change in the existing bad situation. Because most times, I've really never seen people advocate when the situations are too fantastic. So for example, in Nigeria today, we have about 20 million out of school children. If we do not have out of school children, I'm not sure anybody will want to start up an advocacy that looks at out of school children. The reason why there's an advocacy in that direction is because we're in a bad situation. Nigeria currently has the highest amount of out of school children in the world, 20 million people. If we want to go by the statistics of what we say we are in the country, say 200 million people plus, that's about 10%. If I'm not mistaken, my math could be terrible, about 10% of our population are not in school, and it's not good. Lisa, let's go to the next slide, please. We're still looking at advocacy. Yeah, so advocacy is about taking action so that those in positions of power or responsibility change their attitude and behavior about the poor and the disadvantaged people. When you begin to have those kind of conversations, that drives, that drives the quest for the change of attitude of those people who are duty bearers, like we defined when we started. That's advocacy. When we develop a proactive strategy and tactics, aimed at building the power, the clouds, and energy of community members so that they're able to claim their rights and entitlements, it's also advocacy. When you decide to speak for the people in Lokoja today that are submerged under the water, that is advocacy. When you speak for the people in our markets that are being taxed multiple times, that's advocacy. Anything you do, wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, that drives these conversations, is actually advocacy. Lisa, let's go to the next slide, please. Lisa, thank you very much. In understanding what advocacy is already by the conversations we've had so far, I think what is utmostly also important is understanding what policy is. Like I said, almost everybody here, everybody knows what policy is. A policy is a principle of behavior, a roadmap, a custom or convention, a plan or a course of action as pursued by a government, right? So, and policy doesn't just refer to government. I work in the civil society space, and I know that we have tons and tons of policies. The do no harm policy, the sexual harassment policy, the HR policy. So policies basically are just a principle, that guides our behaviors, the roadmap, or convention or custom, a plan or a course of action pursued by a government or any entity that ensures that level of power. A policy could also be a law of a government, or an action plan that precedes a law, most especially an action plan that precedes the law. In these classes I've always insisted that there's a difference between a policy and a law. There's a difference between a policy and a law. And let me just also state it in this class. A policy is not justiciable. A law that has gone through the acts of parliament and has been appended and gazetted, is a law. So it's legally binding, it's legally binding, but a policy is, just like a roadmap, like a blueprint, to say this is where we want to go, this is where we are, this is where we want to go. So if we've had instances where, people have mistaken what public policy is, what a policy document says and what a law says. So for example, you cannot go to court on the strength of a policy document. It's just a blueprint. It's not justiciable, but you can go to court on a law. But also most countries, have made us have set us back a little, when we realized all of a sudden that there are some things that are even laws that are not justiciable. So a typical example, is the right to education. The right to education is a constitutional requirement that is supported by, international conventions. I'm talking about the humanitarian law. I'm talking about the African Union Charter. There's the right, basic human rights principles, that backs up all of these things. But in our constitutions, these things are not justiciable. So what it means is if a child is not in school, you cannot take the government to court because children are not in school. So we have 20 million out of school children today. We cannot take the government to court to ensure that these children's rights are protected. It's quite unfortunate, but it is what it is. So the major difference between a policy and a law is the enforceability of the latter. Next slide, Lisa. Thank you very much, Lisa. You're doing a very wonderful job for me today. Let's flip to the next slide. Okay, great. So let's look at the difference between the both advocacy and policy influencing, right? So advocacy covers a much broader range of activities that might or might not include policy influencing or lobbying. Advocacy is like, advocacy must not, include policy influencing or lobbying. You don't have to sweet talk people into doing things. There's a close-knit relationship between advocates and activists. So if you ask people who an activist is, they'll say an activist is someone who advocates for the rights of people, but it's just for fun, just for laughs. I think activists always make very terrible leaders, if you ask me. I mean, maybe someone can ask this question, post this class so that I can share my thoughts, around activism and leadership, but you don't have to be an activist to be an advocate, and you don't also, because advocacy is really broad. It covers a whole lot of issues. You don't have to be an activist. You don't have to be called an activist or a comrade, before you advocate for the right of people. But simply put, advocacy is the non-violent and legal activities, that we can use to influence government policies. So let's look at quickly when to advocate. When do we advocate? Number one, when there are problems that affect disadvantaged communities. We've already said that in, trying to explain what advocacy is. When there's a blockage in our programs or agenda. For example, I remember the Not Too Young to Run campaigns in 2018, 2019, and 2018. It started it started since 2017, escalated in 2018, and by the end of 2018, young people could vote. Now, there was a blockage in the sense of the age restriction for people to run for office. Chukuma is agreeing with me. We'd have that conversation later. It's all good. So when there's a blockage, the question was, how could people, if at the age of 18 you can go to jail, it means at the age of 18 you should also be responsible enough to lead. Unfortunately, we didn't get 18 years across board, but we saw some reasonable reduction, in the age for people to run for offices. I think it shouldn't even stop there. I think, it should go deeper, and we're going to have those kind of conversations on this. When to advocate, when you advocate when you know the root cause of the problem. So for example, because I come from a solutions perspective, there are a whole lot of things I really do not talk about, right? Let me give us an example. When you talk about the flooding currently in Lokoja, right? There's a level to which you just see flooding, this should have been prevented, this should have been, but without addressing the root cause of the reasons why we have this kind of flooding. The first one happened in 2012, it was nasty in 2012. From 2012 to 2022, that is 10 years. So what it means is within 10 years, we consistently couldn't find a solution to the flooding we're experiencing. If we just speak about the flooding as an incident, we would make a very fatal error without understanding the root cause of the flooding. There's a dam that overflows from Cameroon, that when water is released, it affects everyone who lives or who, resides around the coast, right? Now, that's the root cause of the problem, the dam that is in Cameroon. Now, we cannot fix the flooding issue without, first of all, understanding that the root cause of this flooding, is a dam that is released from somewhere. So if we want to fix the problem as advocates, we must be able to understand the entire context, the root cause of the situation, so that you do not fix the symptoms without addressing the pain points, generally. We also advocate when there are policy implementation gaps. So, for example, the government says we declare a state of emergency in the educational space. That was done in July 2018, if I'm not mistaken, when Malala came to Nigeria. Nigerian government says we've declared a state of emergency in the education space. But I tell you what, we have seen a consistent decline. And at that point, there were like 10 million out of school children. Today, there are 20 million out of school children. So we can also advocate when there's a policy gap, right? We can also advocate when there's a link between the local, national, regional, and international concern. So a typical example on this is probably COVID-19. COVID-19 was just not only a local problem, it was a global problem, right? And the management of COVID-19, therefore, could have warranted a certain level of engagement across board. So when I say engagement across board, I'm talking about, how, people perceived COVID-19 and how people, engaged for action around COVID-19. We also advocate when we need to demand for the rights of people. Sometimes what you're talking about doesn't even concern you. I'm from Ondo State. I'm Nigerian. I live in the Federal Capital Territory. But I can tell you the truth. I've engaged in about 350 local governments in Nigeria as of today. In all of this, I've not even gone to my local government to do anything, right? Right? So the issues may not concern you directly, but the moment you see that it's a problem, you need to advocate for such issues. The next slide. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for doing a very beautiful job. So let's look at targets, for advocacy, because we must see advocacy as a scientific means of engaging government, and when it comes to sciences, the methods, must be consistent. There must be proofs. You must go through a sequence. You must go through a process. And so, when looking at targets for advocacy, you must understand, that a target is the person or individual in position of authority at any level, federal, the state, community or local government level, as we should have it, who can give the decision you want. This is very, very important, guys. You don't just advocate in a vacuum. You must be targeted, and the target, for example, must be the power brokers across any level you want to engage from. So ideally, if we're talking, because I'm using basic education now, for this class. I'm using basic education for this class. And so everything I'm going to say would probably revolve around basic education. Someone says he or she cannot see the screen shared. I don't know how we can work around that. Sorry, please, can you drop in the chat box if you can see the screen? Someone just made a comment. They can't see the screen. Can we see the screen? I can see the screen from. Okay, so maybe it's the person's network. Can you check out your network, or restart, or go out and come back in? Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, your target is the person or individuals in the position of authority. Advocacy is important, and so now when we talk about in the context of politeracy, the electoral college, we're talking about government, right? So I would not be tempted to bring in family, but just as a side, in every family, for example, you have the father, you have the mother, you have the children. Unlike our own generation, when it was difficult for us to ask questions to are very wonderful parents. The children of now are, they ask every question, they say anything. They don't have a censor, so just imagine you have kids and your kids want to go out to play and they come to you, or they go to their mother. I'm using their mother because I'm a guy, so I'm supposed to be a father, right? So they go to their mother and it says, hey, mommy want to go and play. The mom says, hey, go and ask your father, right? Now, it is not because she probably doesn't have the rights to say to the kids, hey, go and play, but probably within that family system, there exists a certain level of, I'm also careful not to use the word authority so that Gen Zs will not begin to, bring in social stratifications, but, you probably feel that, okay, the father is the man of the house, and so the woman, the mother says, go and ask your father. Most times when women say that, they don't want you to go out and play, but because they know that the husband will probably say another no, so the children will now need to understand the power base within the family. Who can I get XYZ from? Who can I get XYZ from? When it comes to getting XYZ, where do I go to? When it comes to getting XYZ, where do I go to? And so it brings us into, these types of targets. And I mean, for the sake of knowledge, putting the body of knowledge together, we have the primary target. The primary target, is the person or the group of individuals, who has the ultimate decision, you understand? They have the ultimate decision. Their yes is their yes, their no is their no. It seems like they have that overarching authority of some sort, while also we have the secondary target. Secondary target is also someone who doesn't have the ultimate decision, but has influence somehow. The person, is quite influential, in the chain of decision making. So what this simply means is you have to understand that we're talking about power and power dynamics now. And in this power and power dynamics, the primary target, your primary target, should be those people who have ultimate power, right? So if you're talking about an issue within the local government, it's okay for you to have a conversation with the education secretary at the local government, but you definitely know that the buck stops at the desk of the local government chairman if he's autonomous, with the Nigerian situation. If you're looking at the statewide, conversation, based on the context, whilst the commissioner of education, for example, is, the responsible for education, you definitely know that the governor has more powers than him. So understanding your targets would help you frame, your advocacy in the right kind of way, so that you are able to identify, who has ultimate powers, or who has powers to influence. Now, this is not always formal. This could be informal. When I'm talking about informal, I also mean that sometimes, even if your primary target is probably the governor, the wife of the governor, based on the context of the situation you're driving, may become a force, that would influence the decision of the governor. So what it means is, I don't know why this is, but almost every wife of governors or presidents just have a team somehow for issues around gender, issues around the girl child, and all of those stuff. I don't know if there's a meeting they attend and they say, okay, this is what we should focus on, but whatever it is, guys, the truth of the matter is, there's some times when, because we're doing a project in Adamawa State, and it's about the out of school girls, out of school children, but focused on the girl child, and one of the most instrumental persons, for example, in that project is the wife of the governor. Now, and she's been able to do a whole lot of stuff, much more than what we could have achieved if we're working with the governor directly. You understand? So you must be able to understand your targets and how your targets interact. Next slide, please. Yeah, so having understood our targets and how our targets are supposed to be engaged quite briefly, let's look at steps in a successful advocacy. Let's look at these steps, because also, like I told you, advocacy is a little scientific. If you want to look at it from that, it has an art to it, it has a skill to it, but it's also a science, because it has a proven sequence, that it should follow. And if you follow this sequence, it should give you a certain results, within certain realities. So let's look at steps in a successful advocacy. There are 4 steps. We're going to look at it one by one. The first step is to familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. See, one of the biggest challenges we've had with people who have come out to advocate for various situations or various things that sincerely to them, fit into the narration of why you should, actually advocate, is the fact that a whole lot of people do not understand that there are rules, processes, there are things that you have to do, there are things that you have to understand, in wanting to advocate. And this is the right time to say sometimes that passion is not enough. Passion is not enough. In fact, most often than not, passion may run you into, genuine problems, and the truth of the matter is, when you run into those problems, sincerely, you cannot say you did not know, right? So whilst you're gingered, whilst you're big on engagement, you're big on advocacy, I want to advocate for the poor, I want to advocate for this community, you must familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. You see, there's a way you would not, you'd normally not talk when you get into the corridors of power. No matter how fierce you are, no matter how fierce you are, it requires a certain level of emotional intelligence. It requires a certain level of mental balance also. I've seen situations where people get into advocacy and, the anger, that came with in their houses, they just poured it everywhere and it messed a whole lot of things up, right? And so there's a need for you to familiarize yourself, with the corridors of power. How do you address people? So, for example, funny story, I've seen situations where, someone was supposed to be advocating for gender-based violence, for example. Yes, you're supposed to advocate for gender-based violence, but you do not understand the context of gender-based violence within a certain, cultural perspective, right? Within a certain religious perspective. What would happen most often than not is you're going to butt heads with the people you're trying to influence. Because if it's about policy influencing, you definitely understand that you cannot enforce, even if you want to enforce, you enforce subtly, you enforce with the skill, you cannot just come and say, everything people are doing here is wrong. No, you can't do that. And so you need to familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. You need to realize how to communicate, effectively. You need to be a little bit, articulate. I'm not saying you should speak the best of English. You can speak vernacular. You can speak your traditional, language. If people understand you, but you also need to be a subject matter, expert. You have to be a subject matter. You have to know what you're talking about. I've seen people quote, very ridiculous statistics, and the people you're speaking to are not really dumb entirely, and sometimes we often think that the people in government, are really silly people. I beg to differ. I've met very intelligent, knowledgeable people within government systems that would call your bluff when you probably either bring, a data that doesn't even make sense, to them. So please, it's very, very important. If you want to have a successful advocacy, you should be able to, Number one, become a subject matter expert. It's say you cannot run away from it. Know the issues. Know the issues. Don't say what you do not know. Know the issues. Don't go and say, because we say there are 20 million out of school children, you now go to, a state, for example, you're advocating on education and you're saying, there are 20 million out of school children in one state. No, it's in Nigeria. You understand? You also have to understand the policies you're speaking to. It's very important. What policy am I speaking to? Then the second thing, is to classify the players. See, before you even go out, you need to understand who your stakeholders are. And I remember that in the last class, I was going to say that, and maybe I would say it in this class also, and request for Lisa and the team to be able to help me work around this. For us to have a little hands-on session and a practical session. Maybe I could probably give you guys an assignment or something, for you to work on, before the next class, if possible. You have to understand how to classify your players. You have to know your allies. You have to know your opponents. You have to know your targets. We've spoken about targets already. Your allies are those people that would easily embrace your message. Your allies are those people that would want to listen to you. Your allies are those people who, would want to support what you're saying. Now, your allies exist everywhere. So for example, you go to a government ministry, there's always somebody in every government ministry that knows the right thing. The difficulty may be how you locate those people, but there's always someone that knows the right thing. So when you're talking about the right thing, the person can connect to you. It's also a skill that you probably have to learn on understanding your allies. How do you, for example, I'm talking in this room, I'm talking to 5 people. I look at them in their faces. I can be able to know who is on my side and who is going to be my biggest opposition. And I always tell this story of time I was doing some advocacy work in Kogi State, in the local government, Adavi local government. And, the caretaker chairman was feeling me, he was shaking his head, he was accepting to everything I was saying. But there was a guy there who, was the person in charge of projects in the local government who just felt I didn't have the right to ask, all the questions I was asking, So from that conversation, I immediately understood who my allies are and who my opponent was going to be. So I properly placed my opponent in his right place, so much so that there was nothing he was going to say that I either didn't have a relevant answer. Now, this was not me exchanging words with him, but this was me emphasizing on my allies, speaking closely to my allies, so much so that my ally was subsumed in what I was saying, that no matter what my opponent or the opposition in the room was saying, it wasn't going to have any effect. And when I wanted to also end, my conversation, I made it clear to, everybody that, see, as a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and a tax-paying citizen at that, I have the right, to ask government at any level questions, right? So my opponent, the guy didn't really have anything to say. He was just murmuring everywhere. I got what I wanted, guys. So sometimes it's very, very important for you to, not just sometimes, all the time, it's very important for you to know your allies, understand your opponents and your targets. C, which is the third thing I'll talk about on steps for successful advocacy, is you need to rank your decision makers. When you look at your stakeholders, when you analyze your stakeholders, your targets, who has more power, who can make this decision, who can influence, who can help you influence, or who can support you, you need to rank your decision makers. Why is this important? And this is also something that I wish we could do practically. You can use the numbering system, right? Who is possibly, your major target, your primary target? How much power does that person have? Rank the decision makers. If I'm going to the local government, I want to see the local government, local government chairman, the deputy local government chairman. I want to see the local government secretary. I want to be able to rank all of these people, because there are some issues where you may feel that, the local government chairman, can make that decision. No, he practically cannot make that decision. The local government chairman may just be an appointee, of the state governor. So you probably know that he has to now go back to the state governor, right? So probably what you want to do, I know that some states, for example, have what they call the Ministry of Local Government and Chieftaincy Affairs. You probably want to, even if the conversation is a local government conversation and the local government chairman is supposed to be the highest person in the local government, there's still somebody above him, who is probably the commissioner for local government and chieftaincy affairs. Over that local government and chieftaincy affairs is probably the SSG, of the state, probably the chief of staff of the state, then probably the deputy governor, the governor. So you must be able to rank, these decision makers, from the people who, would definitely support your advocacy demands, number one. Number two, your potential supporters, people who you feel have the potential, you could win them over, right? People who are sitting on the fence that you feel you can easily, win over. The fence sitters, the undecided people, you understand, your likely opponent, your definite opponent, these things are very, very important. You must identify all of these people and rank them adequately so that you understand the level of effort you have to put in. So what this means, for example, is if I want to speak to, if I identify my opponent, I would definitely know how. There are some people that will never change their minds, guys. See, there's nothing you're going to say to them, they'll never change their minds. Let me bring this to, the contemporary, reality of the Nigerian states now. We're headed into an elections. Campaigns, have started. And it's very important. I'm saying this because I see a logo of, the SDP, on this conversation, right? So there are some people that would
that's actually a class assignment, sir. It's not related to the main politics. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, it's a class assignment.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we're having a pseudo political party campaigning and everything within the class.
Okay, yeah, so it's relevant. Thank you for those heads up. It's very relevant then. So there are some people who would support SDP no matter what you say or not. No, there are some people who would support the APC no matter what you say, no matter how you say it, no matter where you say it, no matter the depth you're able to dig, they will still support the APC. There's nothing in this life you can do about it. See, if you spend your advocacy time, SDP all the way, SDP. What's the tagline for SDP? I don't know the tagline. If you can type the tagline, for SDP. PDP still uses power to the people. Okay, SDP is progress. Okay, SDP progress. Yeah, there are some people that would support, a political party no matter what you say about the political party. They would not move an inch. They know the truth that the political party is useless, but they would never support any other political party. Guys, it is a blatant waste of time, for you to engage these kind of people. You don't spend the time you're supposed to be using to, speak to the people who are sitting on the fence. You don't spend those time, engaging people who are your definite opponents. It's a waste of time. It's a sincere waste of time. There are some people that would never, listen to you, no matter how interesting your advocacy is, or no matter how the amount of wrongs you want to correct. Now, the fourth thing in the steps of successful advocacy we need to see is inform and build relationships. Advocacy requires a series of formal and informal one-on-one contacts with decision makers, and a steady stream of clear, concise backup information. So what it means is, see, if your perspective is always that government is useless, you see, government may not be able to listen to you because you've painted everybody with the same brush and the same color. You understand? There's still some people within the system who knows and understands, what you're talking about. But when you say government is useless, you're painting everybody with the same brush. It makes your advocacy really difficult. Now, and this is where people need to be very careful, because when you're advocating, you should be very careful about optics and perception. And maybe a typical example. I'm not a fan of the APC or the the current president or the aspirant on the platform of the APC, for example, right? So if I want to advocate on a policy, for example, and I speak because of my position of the APC, critical position of the APC, and I probably begin to advise the government on the amount of out-of-school children, there's a likelihood that the government is not going to listen to me. Probably because some people in the government may feel that, yeah, this guy doesn't like us. This guy hates us totally. This guy doesn't like us. But there are some people also who, are able to find that balance, and when they speak, people listen to them. You understand? You see, unfortunately, when it comes to advocacy, you can only control your narrative. You cannot control what the other person chooses to believe or choose to listen to. Now, and that's where the skill now comes in, the ability for you to sell your advocacy in such a way that those other people would see sense in what you're saying. Even if they do not like you as a person, they see sense in what you say. And this sense comes in when you are able to engage based on real evidence, data to support what you're saying. Right? You're a subject matter expert. So no matter what they do, they have to listen to you. You know the problem. You've identified the gaps, the root cause. You've created a solution. Because one of the definitions of advocacy we looked at is the fact that you're driving change. You're preferring solutions, workable solutions. So advocacy is not just about talking about the problem, but your ability to, create a solution. Talk is cheap. The moment when you're able to create a solution and begin to push the solution from the position of your understanding of the problem, then you can pass the mark of being a good advocate, which involves skill, very important skill. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's look at dimensions of advocacy. Dimensions of advocacy, very important. There are three dimensions of advocacy. The first level of advocacy is for the beneficiaries and the marginalized. The second dimension is with the beneficiaries and the marginalized. The third is by the beneficiaries and the marginalized. So let me explain what this means to you. So the first level of advocacy for anyone is the first dimension, rather, of advocacy is that because the beneficiaries or the marginalized do not understand, or they have limited knowledge in how to solve their problems through advocacy, you come in as one with knowledge, and you're advocating for them. So it is you speaking for them. You understand? So it's you speaking for those children who cannot go to school. It is you speaking for their parents, who do not have access to education. It is you doing the speaking for them. That's the first level. But if your advocacy stops at the point where you are the one who always speaks for, then it's not really skin deep, because you see, the people who, see the real problems must be able to themselves become subject matter experts, because there's what is called experiential knowledge. Experiential knowledge. I may not be able to speak about, out of school children because I went to school. So my speaking about the menace of out of school children is from an idealistic and a knowledge-based perspective, not experiential, right? So I can come with my passion and speak about out of school children and you'll be impressed. But it must not stop there. It must go to the second level where this advocacy is done with the people, the marginalized people who cannot take their children to school for whatsoever reason. That's the second dimension. So we started from the point where I was the one speaking for them. I have been able to speak for them to the level and build their capacities to the level where, I now begin to speak with them. So it's not just Busayo now, but Busayo and the people who, are experiencing, this menace of our school children. It must not also stop there. It must go deeper to the level where the people themselves, are the ones speaking on their own challenge. Because the truth of the matter is, especially those of us in the civil society space, we have an over-bloated ego. We always feel it's about us. We always feel like, and it's very nasty, permit my French, and I don't know where we get these, very silly ideas from. It's always about self, personal aggrandizement, and I mean, LinkedIn is not even helping us these days, so I'm very careful when I want to talk about, my advocacy work, because I don't want it to be about just me alone, and maybe I would sow these seeds in our minds. No matter the advocacy you are on, the moment you place yourself as the ultimate Lord superior person, you're the only one who can do this, you've messed up the entirety of the advocacy, because there would be no sustainability. For me, I pick up an issue, when I'm done with that issue, I move to another issue. But the sustainability of my advocacy is my ability to work with the community, so much so that they're able to speak for themselves when I'm not there. The moment I can achieve that, for me, my advocacy journey on that matter is completed, because the community would learn how to use that skill I've been able to teach them on other things. So my engagement with them may have been on education, but they can apply the same advocacy methodology to health. They can apply the same thing to environment, to water, sanitation, and hygiene, to government projects on roads, name it. So the moment I do not share this knowledge and information with them, the moment I leave that community, I live with everything I've done, which doesn't make sense. It's efforts in futility, right? So it's very important as advocates, we put it at the back of our minds that it's not really about us. It's about the people we're advocating for. Even though, you feel the brunt of the problem. And another reason why these dimensions of advocacy is important is so that you can come out with a clean hands. See, when most times we're driven by passion and we do not share this knowledge with the marginalized people, or the beneficiaries we're speaking for, or the larger community we're speaking for, it is going to be easy for people to point hands to you and say, you have compromised. Now, you may have not compromised, actually. You may have just grown weary or tired, because advocacy is a big deal. You may have just gotten tired because you do not have a backup in the community. Your strength is exhausted. Community will begin to feel, we did not see you today. What's happening? They begin to feel that you've collected money and you've abandoned them, right? So it's very important for us to understand the dimensions of advocacy and the importance of those dimensions. It's important for us to, there's nobody, you can come in for the community, you're speaking for the community, you are influencing for the community. When, government comes, the community is quick to call you, hey, these government people are here, what should we tell them, yada, yada, yada. It's beautiful, you understand, but please let it not stop at that level. Let it go to the point where it's with you and the community. Let it get to that point where it's with you and the community. It's very, very important. Then the highest level is when community is able to advocate for themselves. So let's look at principles of policy influencing. My time is fast spent. Please, how many minutes do I have, Lisa? My time is fast spent. So let's look at.
Okay, the class extends till 7, but we usually give enough time because of questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll keep to that. Let's look at principles of policy influencing. Very important. Principles of policy influencing. The first principle of policy influencing is, we use the acronym, CLASP, that's CLASP. The first principle, which is very important, is credibility. See, if you do not have any iota of credibility, just leave advocacy and policy influencing alone.
Just leave it. Don't spoil the space for people who have genuine intentions. If you are not credible, if people cannot trust you, don't waste your time. See, advocacy is not politics. Okay. You know, a politician can be dishonest and still have people who support him for whatsoever reason. A politician can be dishonest and still have people who support him. You know, this person is a thief, but because he's a politician, for whatsoever reason, people will still support him. But when it comes to advocacy, because you're dealing with delicate people who are already marginalized, because you are dealing with people who do not even have a voice most times. See, if you do not have that, if there's no outer of integrity, you know, or trust, if you don't have it, see, don't waste your time. You don't mess up the space for people. Don't further deepen the core. Because we've seen situations where we've gone to communities and people in the community say, NGO people, I mean, we should get out. People are the same set of human beings. And I'm at a loss. I'm like, but I've never come here before. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes, not in probably their own experiences, people have come and said stuff to them and they actually use them. So true story. Someone has said to us, these NGO people, you come, use us, you snap our pictures, you use us to go and collect money from the donor. I felt very embarrassed when someone said that to me in a town hall meeting. I had to explain that, see, come, sincerely, I am different, so please, if you don't have integrity in the long and short, stay away. Just stay away. Go and become a political party supporter, or something. Stay away from advocacy. Secondly, legitimacy. Who or what gives you the right to interfere? I was telling us about the experience in Kogi, for example. One of the questions my opponents, was asking me is, what gives me the right to come and ask them this question? Number one, I told him I was a Nigerian citizen and my tax, is what powers the institution of state. And so as a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I have the right, to ask these questions. You understand? What gives you the right? You get what gives you that legitimacy? What gives you the right to interfere? Is it your community? It may not be your community, but the issue concerns you. So you have to speak up, which is very important. Number three, accountability. So A represents accountability, transparency towards the deciders and the constituency. We've seen situations where, I remember the 2012 subsidy protest. Some people flew from Lagos to Abuja, and the moment they flew back to Lagos, the protest, was messed up, and the military came on the street and shot people and all of those stuff, right? Now, there are people who believe that some people were sellouts, you understand? And maybe we put, one of the reasons why maybe the EndSARS protest didn't have a definite leadership or structure was because of the knowledge or the experience of 2012, where some people sold out the bunch of other people, right? So you must understand that there's a trust deficit within the system already. There's a distrust between government and the people. The people do not trust each other. The people do not trust government. Government do not trust the people. Government do not even trust itself. Now, and that's why I said, if you don't have credibility, stay away. Because you must be transparent to the deciders, the duty bearers, and also be transparent to the constituency, the people you're speaking for. You must be. The moment you cannot be trusted, the moment you're not accountable. So this level of accountability could be as little as you saying to the community that you're having a meeting with government people today. And maybe as a skill, you don't go alone. You go with members of the community. That's how you begin to, advocate with them. On every of the advocacy strides I've been able to make, I have never gone alone as one man. I either go with the community head or the people, the community have said, okay, work with these people. Especially when you're meeting the duty bearers. Don't go alone. Number two, you cannot go and meet a duty bearer and the duty bearer is giving you transport. No. I have gone, I mean, like I've said, I've worked in over 350 local governments in this country. In some of those local governments, in some of these states, I mean, I've walked around across the 36 states in Nigeria. In some of these states where I go for these advocacies, I have government people, come out and give me envelopes. They say, please take this one for your transport, take this one for lunch. Never. I have never for once taken that money. The reason is because it limits my legitimacy. It limits my credibility. And I do that deliberately also in the presence of the people so that they would know that when you go on advocacy, because I'm teaching them, when you go on advocacies, you are not supposed to collect anything. The highest thing I take is water. The highest I have taken in my work is water. I mean, so you come to a meeting, they give you water. You understand? Because sometimes when you do, and let me tell us this. Let me drive it deeper. I was in Jos, Plateau State. I was working on, it wasn't really an advocacy per se, it was a monitoring and evaluation project, right? And the people, that's the institution I was working with, had made various preparations and all, and they've had this money put in envelopes, so it also involved us going across schools, across various local governments in Plateau State, and I was working with my team. I was also working with the M&E guy for the institution, the project, which was the government, World Bank and government project, Now, for every school we went to, I had noticed that each of these principals would put something in an envelope, you understand, and give it to, the M&E guy from the government, that was with us. I'd noticed, and I'd called my guys, WhatsApp message, the guys that were together, and I told them, guys, observe what is going on. Went to about 6 schools, and each of those principals did the same thing. When we got to the office, after the whole inspection, when we got to the office, the M&E guy called me into his office, and I told him, let me allow my people come in. He says, no, let them stay outside. So I went inside with him, and he brought out all of these envelopes and put it on the table and says, and he was opening each of those envelopes, and he says that this was what this school gave, this was what this school gave, and he put everything together. Now, 2 things that I did. Number one, guys, and this is where emotional intelligence comes from. You're trying to build a relationship with these people, both formal and informal relationship. So if I had said to them, this is wrong, this is blah, 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 you definitely know that the next time I come, they're not going to, everybody's going to avoid me, like a plague. So what I did was I let him do his thing, and I said to him, sincerely, this is against the policy of my organization. And sincerely, it's against the policy of my organization. You understand? So for us, we would, respectfully decline this. You understand? And he felt a certain kind of way. I had to explain to him that, see, if I go out of my, my bands, my what guides my organization, I'm going to, put myself in, in a very wrong place, And I also told him immediately, because I knew that I was going to leave my team, in Jos. I said, it's against our policy, to take anything from anywhere we go to. It didn't end there. He went to the head of the project, who had already, raised the memo to give us some funds, and all of those stuff. And I said the same thing to him, and I apologized. Me sincerely was sorry, but this is not our way of doing, this is not our way of doing things. I don't have a problem, with it. This conversation ends in this room and all of those stuff. What happened after then was that the respect those people, respect and regard those guys had for me and my organization went to another level. When I'm talking relationships, I can pick my phone and call, the guys in charge of the project, and they'll respond to me, right? That is because I was able to respect the bounds of my work as a civic, as a civil society guy, and also my bounds, in terms of my own personal values. Because truth of the matter is, I'd have collected those funds and nobody knows about it, and nobody talks about it. I'll still be in a good position with them. I'll still be in a good position with my organization. But it went across. So guys, if you cannot be accountable, especially to the duty bearers and, to the people we have to the constituencies we represent, please stay away from advocacy. I beg you, because you will definitely see money. I tell you the truth, that especially when people feel that this guy is saying things that are not popular, you definitely see money. The decision would be for you to over that time. So the S stands for service. How are you being helpful? What's the win-win situation? It's a part of the things you should first of all analyze before you go to the field. The truth of the matter is, see guys, and maybe the not too young to run campaign would probably teach us something very important. Even if we didn't get 18 years across board, there was something on the table. See, know when to strike the win-win balance. Advocacies may not be completed in a year, not 2 years, not 3 years, not 4 years. There's some advocacies that have lasted. For example, the Petroleum Industry Bill lasted for so long. The Freedom of Information Act lasted for 11 years. Lasted for 11 good years until it became law. The advocacies that may take a very long time. There's an advocacy now to expand basic education from 9 years to 12 years. It takes a very long time, right? In fact, there's some advocacies that the people that started the advocacy has died. There's new people that are continuing. You see, advocacies do not always start and end in a day. So the wins you get, take those wins, celebrate those wins, and rest. If you cannot continue, another person will continue. If the purpose is not for personal aggrandizement, you know when to strike a win-win balance. For example, the ASU strike currently going on. Whatever your perspective are to the ASU strike, there should be a certain level. For me personally, I think at some point, there should be a win-win somewhere. At some point also, you have to match down. You see, match down the pedal, don't remove your leg. Because the moment you remove your leg, you're cowed, So depending on the situation, right? There's no one size fits all, to this. But if it's about service, you'd always look for the win-win, because you cannot win all. There are some you lose. There are some that you'd, strike a balance. There are some that you ultimately win. The last but not the least, which is the P, is power. What is your power base? How do you use it? Are you going to collaborate in terms of joint forces? What is your expertise? What expertise are you bringing to the table? What solution are you bringing in? Do you even believe your message? I've spoken about this already. You must be a subject matter expert. If you are not, look for a subject matter expert that can believe in you, that can believe what you're selling. If you do not, and that's why politeracy is here. You must understand what it means, what politics really means. Some of us think politics is idealistic. You think politics is heaven and hell. You're in for a shocker. You must understand that deals are cut every now and then. In fact, I say it sincerely. Now, when it comes to political leadership, there's no way you want to run away from it. People cut deals anywhere, everywhere, and anyhow. Politics is not really a moral, and so when people say somebody is a rescuer, or somebody is a saint, or somebody is come on, stop all those things. That's not politics, Somebody would go and tweet that this person thinks is meeting various people, meeting various corrupt people, and I'm like, duh. You see, politics is not there's nothing moral about politics. In all sincerity, there's almost nothing moral about politics. So if you have the principles of wrong and right, this one is wrong, this one is right, driving you, you would make serious errors, when you get into politics. Sincerely, politics is about interest. But what interest? To what interest are we talking about? What is the level of, what's the word now? What's the level of impact? Because the truth of the matter is, see, no matter who becomes the president today, the president would not dance to your whims and caprices all the time. whether you like it or not. Not every policy is going to be popular with you. Not everything is going to be pleasing to you. It doesn't mean the person is a bad person, but it means that because of the vantage position the person has, the person weighs a whole lot of things. I'm not talking about docility. I'm not talking about the Buhari kind of, politics, who lacks optics and lacks, drive or sincerity or any of these things. No, I'm talking about, in fact, in politics, leaders are supposed to make some very hard decisions, at some point. So if all you have in your mind is wrong or right, we'll have a long way to go in that regard. So what's your power base? Are you in a coalition? Can you stand alone? Guys, I advise you do not stand alone. Who is supporting you? When I talk about support, I'm not talking about godfatherism now. No, please. I'm not talking about godfatherism. I'm talking about something. Yeah, I have 7 minutes to go. So please, Lisa, let's go to the next slide, please. Please, can we flip to the next slide? Thank you. So let's look at tools for advocacy. A successful advocacy requires that we identify useful tools. What tools are these? These tools should be able to help create change and transformation. The media is important. Radio, new media, old media, radio, newspapers, TVs, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, name it. The media is very important. See, one of the ways to amplify your messaging is the media. Now, the media has been democratized, guys. You have a Facebook account, you have a Twitter account. What are you using it for? It's very important. As an advocate, you must learn how to use all of these tools. The radio could be expensive. You may not have money to pay for radio shows. You may not have money to publish an article on the newspaper. Neither would Channels TV invite you, because you're not Kunle Lawal, but the truth of the matter is you can start from where you are. You don't have to have a big name. You can start from where you are. Pick, even if it's a little issue, you don't have to pick the big popular issues. Those big popular issues were little issues that were amplified over time. So start from where you are, start from your environment, start from your street, start from your community. You don't have to start from Abuja. Abuja is too big, for whatsoever reason. So start from where you are. It's very important. Number 2, research is very important. I say you have to be a subject matter expert. So you have to research. See, guys, research. What are the contemporary issues, in that space of advocacy, you want to pull, how is it in, other African countries? What is happening in other states? You need to research, mobilizing and campaigning. You need to have, you need to build a clout online and offline, so that when Buhari's government bans Twitter, you can still have your offline audience. You understand? Or when Buhari's people or Lai Mohammed, sanctions Channel TV or closes down Arise TV and all of these guys, you still have your offline people. So your mobilizing must be online and offline. It's very, very important. Your campaigning, must be consistent offline, and online. Information dissemination, this is very, very important. You have to have, probably get creatives, people who can do videos, people who can do, depending on the strength, your capacity or the strength of your team, you have to probably bring in infographics. It's beautiful. It makes community members understand. You have to speak the language of the community. It's very, very important. You can come up with policy briefs. Policy briefs are sometimes very important for government institutions and for literate people in communities, right? There are a whole lot of people who are not literate, so a policy brief, for example, would not do too much to them. And even if you want to come up with a policy brief at all, you need to come up with a policy brief, that probably looks at something in their local language that is easy for them to understand. So these are very important, guys. Monitoring and evaluation. You have to always come back and ask yourself, what have we achieved? What are we achieving? Where are we? What strategies should change? What should we do differently? If you just do advocacy, and you don't come back and ask yourself these questions, are we actually making any progress? Do we need to change strategy? You're just exerting energy, anyhow. Even the Bible says, sorry, I'm a Christian, so permit me to quote the Bible. It says, any man who wants to build a house must first of all sit down and count the costs, so that people will not pass and curse him. Yeah, this foolish man started something and he cannot complete it. Count the cost. Is it becoming too expensive? What are the cheaper means that I can be able to achieve this? These are very important. So monitoring and evaluation are very important. Litigation and lobbying. Litigation, go to court. I like what SERAP is doing, guys. The SERAP will just wake up, bam, we have sued the federal government to court. We have sued the Lagos state government to court. I love it, litigation. In as much as our justice system is really slow in Nigeria, and it's quite unfortunate that electoral matters, are faster to address than social issues, in the courts. So litigation is also a veritable tool. I know citizens gavel, for example. I know lawyers who have gone to court. There's a guy called Sesu Akume. You can check him out. He's always taking Benue State government to court. There's another guy, there's another lawyer, Ocholi Okutepa, always going to courts, taking GTB to court, taking the Nigerian Immigration Service to court, so litigation is there. If you have the skill for litigation, why not go to court? If you have the skill for lobbying, so lobbying involves various interesting elements of trying to get people on your side, particularly when it has to do with parliament. If you have those skills, then the popular one we know, protest and rallies. Hit the street, protest. End SARS now. Say no to killings. All of those interesting dimensions. We all know about protests, and rallies. Protests are very important in a democracy. One of the undemocratic tenets of this current government was the moment they tried to stop people from protesting. It was terribly undemocratic, for people who think they're Democrats. So guys, next slide, please. I think I should be done if the next slide is not important. Advocacy tool, we've spoken about this. Let's go to the next slide so that we take questions for the remaining 30 minutes. Advocacy framework. Yes, let's do advocacy framework. Advocacy framework is important. Issue selection, you have to select your issue. What is the issue? You have to select your issue, gather and analyze information on the issue. Like I said, please get information on the issue. You have to be a subject matter expert, develop your advocacy aims and objectives. You should ask yourself, what are the aims and the objectives of this advocacy? What do I want to see? What do I want to see in this advocacy? We've spoken about identifying your target is important, identifying your allies and your adversary. Number 6, identify your resources, human resources, capital. How much money do you have for this advocacy? Identify your human resources, identify the people, the skill sets you need. It's very important. Create an action plan. You must create an action plan. An action plan is a simple document that shows what you need to do next. This is what I'm doing today. This is what I'm doing tomorrow. This is what I'm doing next tomorrow. Please create that. If this was a physical class, we would have done these things hands-on, then implement your advocacy, monitor and evaluate. We've spoken about this already. The next slide, please. Yes, so thank you guys. I hope with these few points of mine, I've been able to convince you and not to confuse you, by the way, that advocacy cannot operate in a vacuum. You need to have the requisite skill, and you cannot influence policies without advocacy, right? You can't influence policies without advocacy. You must understand the issue. You must be grounded in the issues for you to be able to be a successful advocate and a policy influencer. Thank you very much for listening. I will take questions now.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for this very insightful, almost practical, because you actually cited a lot of examples that, real life examples of what you have been able to do at different points in time. Okay, so this first question is coming from Utibe Akpan, and he says, how do you service your relationships with the corridor of power for effective lobbying? And this question is coming from the chat box.
Okay. How do you service your relationship to the corridor of power, for effective
For
lobbying?
effective lobbying, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So now it depends on your personal value. Sincerely, guys, it depends on your personal values. If you know that your values are very weak, stay away from lobbying. If you know your values are very weak, stay away from lobbying. I can speak with you, I can be friends with you without supporting, in this context, I can speak to people in power without actually supporting everything they do, right? And this is the ability of you being objective. You understand? So, for example, I've met so many, civil servants, so many politicians. One of the things I'm able to strike across board is the fact that there's a win-win situation here, right? So, for example, when an advocacy in some few states, I always give this example in all the class. I didn't want to give it because it was becoming boring to me personally, but we're trying to get some laws passed in some few states, and the USAID actually had a promise for when this state government passed these laws, an amount that would come to them. So it was easy for us to be able to speak with the people in government, the SSG, for example, of a particular state. And I said to him, sir, if we can get this law passed, the USAID is releasing XYZ amount to you. You understand? Now, because of the backing of the institution, the USAID, there was that seamless relationship, and there was that ability to fast track, the passage of those laws, from our advocacy, and we actually achieved it within record times. You understand, right? I mean, it comes with its own skill and all of those other interesting stuff. So, I mean, for example, when the House of Assembly passed it, the Secretary of State Government called me personally and said, the House of Assembly just passed it. The Attorney General of the state, is working on it and is going to take it to the governor for signing. You understand? So those relationships were, really cordial relationships. You understand? I personally, after my advocacies, I do not really have any business with them. It depends on what you want to use those relationships for, but for me, I mean, they know me, they understand what I'm speaking to, they understand, what I want to achieve. The moment I achieve it, sincerely before God and man, I back out. You understand? But in some situations, in some instances, you need to keep those contacts for whatever reason you may need it for. It could be for access. It could be for a different issue. It could be for a different situation. Yeah, there are times when I've been able to, maintain relationships with even people with in this current government. I must say, people that we really, if I'm online and I see them, I just go against them, but we maintain that professional relationship because they understand what I do. They understand how I do what I do. And I don't, try to leave. So it depends largely on your ability to manage relationships and your values. Your values are very important. If you reach out to these people and the only thing you speak about is, chief, I need contracts, it's a problem. It's a very, very big problem. They'll never take you seriously. I think I've been able to speak to that question.
Yes, you have. So there's this second question coming from the chat box as well, and this one comes from Abraham, and the questions are, I'm just going to take it one after the other, then you can actually answer to them as well. Number one question says, is it every advocacy that has opponents? One. Then secondly, he says, okay, do you want to answer that before I ask the second one?
Yeah. So let me, so that we don't spend too much time. I mean, it depends on the context, right, guys? It depends on the context. See, every dysfunctional situation is servicing an interest, whether I would like it or not. Quote me. Every dysfunctional situation is servicing an interest. So, for example, no matter the importance of water, of potable water, to communities, the fact that government is not providing that water, there's an interest that is being serviced. The pure water companies, the people who sell water, the water corporation themselves, there's an interest, you understand? So if I'm advocating for water, you understand? If I'm advocating for water, I am going against some interests. So those interests would see me as an opponent or see my advocacy as being anti their benefits. if you understand the interest game and how it works, you'd realize that the dysfunction of Nigeria as an entity fits a certain interest. The reason for conflict or elongated conflict, and I dare say, quote me, one of the reasons why the insurgency in the Northeast is protracted is because it serves a certain interest. Quote me anywhere. I mean, it's a body of knowledge. This is not conspiracy theory. I did a course in my first degree. It was called The Merits of War, not demerits, merits of war, benefits of war. It was one of the craziest things I'd heard at that point in my life. So even war itself has benefits, you understand? So, there are some wars that would not end because people are benefiting from it. And people benefit. In fact, the dysfunction in Nigeria, those of us in the civil society space benefit from the dysfunction in Nigeria, because the truth of the matter is, if Nigeria is not in this dysfunctional state, some of us will not exist. That's the truth. You understand? Now, the problem is when the people who benefit from the dysfunction begins to become a stumbling block to fixing the problem. You understand? So, for example, if we have it in the Northeast, we have a whole lot of civil society guys who do not want the conflict in the Northeast to come to an end because of what they benefit from it. Some people go as much as, doing very crazy things. Let's leave, those are not the issues for discussion today, you understand? But yes, I think in my experience, every advocacy, and sometimes the opponents also may not understand where you're coming from. Sometimes it's not their fault. It's not because they're benefiting from anything. They don't just understand where you're coming from. Sometimes some people feel you are too young to be the one to talk about this issue. So even if they understand the problem and they support you, they feel it's not supposed to be you. Do you understand? So opponents can come in, from various perspectives. And I think I can see the second question of Abraham. Can targets be seen? Yes, your primary target or your secondary target can be an opponent. Your opponent the governor can be your opponent, no matter the amount of power he has. So what you probably need to do is to get people around him that is influential or people he listens to be able to drive your advocacy. You understand? Your targets could also be, opponents, where the opponents basically come from. I've explained it comes from everywhere. Sometimes it comes from your village people too. Your village people who do not want you to succeed. It comes from your opponent comes from anywhere. That was an enlightenment. Your opponents can come from anywhere. In fact, your family members could be an opponent to your advocacy because probably they benefit from it. You understand? So an example is if there's a bad road, and I've seen this happen. I've seen communities come out to break government road because they want to sell to people that are traveling. I've seen it. It didn't even make sense to me. You cut a highway so that cars will slow down, so that you can sell to them. So this opponent comes from various dimensions, and I think I've answered that question.
Okay, let me go to the hands raised. Okay, Harry Omoro, you have to unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Okay, Harry Omoro. Unmute yourself and ask your question, okay, Harry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah. I'm speaking from Delta State. I have interrelated questions I need to ask. The first one is, I'm a bit confused between the word agitation and that of advocacy. I need to get more explanations about the difference or the similarity. Two, that's question two. The comradeship activities, especially in the higher institutions, could it be seen as advocacy or agitations or both? Thank you.
Hello, sir. Yeah, we got your question. We just need the facilitator to come on. Mr. Pusayo.
Okay,
yeah, great.
Yourself. Yeah, great. So advocacy and agitation. Agitation is a kind of advocacy, right? Agitation is a kind of advocacy. You see, but the clear difference is most times agitation comes from a place of anger and passion alone. You see, that's the problem. You see, the moment when you allow anger engulf you, it becomes an emotional roller coaster. Because when you're angry, you lack the critical abilities to evaluate what you're doing. And remember that we said that a successful advocacy must be evaluated. A successful advocacy has various trappings, you know, and these trappings are scientific. On my last slide, you could see the steps for advocacy. You see what you have to do. But when it comes to agitation, it's always about solidarity forever. We must always fight for our rights. I understand that is protest, you know, and that's a form of advocacy, you know, but the moment your agitation lacks the critical element of evaluation, it lacks the critical element of fixing structures, then I think it becomes a problem. It's just an emotional roller coaster. It's just anger, you know, it's just anger. Now, those anger, which could be positive when converted to a very measurable way to drive impact, you know, it could be good on that level. But if it just remains at that primitive, permit me to use that word, angry, emotional tantrum, you know, you just throwing tantrums everywhere, it doesn't cut it at this point. No, it moves very far, you know, from your advocacy. It moves very far from your advocacy. So what I'm saying in essence is it's okay to be angry, but when you're angry, there are steps you have to follow before it becomes a full-fledged advocacy, you know. And the moment when emotions does not supersede you, that critical thinking and planning and strategy comes in, you know, then it goes through, you know, the various principles of advocacy. And when you also look at the dimensions of advocacy I mentioned, you would have to understand how, you know, your anger, you know, can move from that, you know, that primitive level, you know, of agitation, of just shouting, you know, to the win-win situation we're talking about, the judge situation, you know, where you can have a conversation, you know, on a particular matter. When you link it to the university system, the comradeship in the university system, unfortunately for me, I didn't do any of those stuffs in the university. I had friends who did it, you know, and who were different, who were very, very different. I mean, I can mention a few of them. You know, till tomorrow, I still respect them for their perspectives. You know, it's not just about shouting. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's not about being the Aluta 01. You understand? It's about understanding that, you know, is my agitation measurable? Is it just driven by anger? Is it just driven by, you know, emotions? Or I can be able to manage or measure, you know, or evaluate the progress I have been able to get. You know, I think that's what makes the difference, you know, entirely. Agitation, you know, in agitating, you could be, you know, advocating, but it shouldn't stop at that level of anger, that raw anger, you know, that probably refuses to listen or refuses to cut, you know, understand where to strike your balance in terms of your win and the gains. And like I said, in advocacy, it could last a long time, but there's a need for emotional stability there.
Okay, thank you very much. Ifyong Essien, please unmute yourself. Okay, let's have Idiong Senye Undunobong. Idiong Senye Udunogom, please unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to say very big thank you to Mr. Busayo. That was quite clear for anyone to understand. But I have a concern. And I just want to know if it's possible we get this off the space. You know, when he was talking about class, one of the things he was mentioning was integrity, and he shared his experience on how he got embarrassed when he was trying to intervene for a community. So I would like to ask, how possible is it that we can take all these other guys, the bad guys from the civil engagement space, so that we know the guys that are in the space are actually passionate to help the people, and not the people are not the ones going out to see how they can calm the people and get whatever it is they could extract from the people who are actually supposed to be getting aid.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. You know, but sincerely, my response is going to be very straight and direct. There's little to what we can do. You know, because interests, we have divergent interests, and you see those interests sometimes. You know, if you spend your time trying to tackle all of those things, you'd get distracted from the goal, right? So the only thing I can say is we need more people who are sincere to lead these advocacies, right? Instead of us pursuing the people that are not sincere. Because see, you know, I'm not sure there's any meter. I wish there was a meter where you can see on people's forehead sincere, you know, not sincere. I've seen people that started advocacies on a sincere level, very sincere, 100% sincere, but later it became skewed, right? I've seen that happen also. You know, I've also seen people who I know that this person is not a trustworthy person, but the person got into advocacy and did what the person can do, you know, made money. Because the truth of the matter is, see, as an advocate, most times, when you begin your advocacy and you're gathering clouds and you're gathering people, there are other people's interests that begins to come into your advocacy. And I must be very practical. If, for example, you start an advocacy today on back to school for children, right? 20 million out of school children. And your advocacy in 3 months was able to ensure that 10,000 people went back to school out of 20 million. Verifiable, you can prove it in terms of your monitoring and evaluation. What would happen is the donor community would come to you and they'll say to you, we like what you're doing. How can we support you? And it's good because they put in some funds. They support you with donor funds, right? You know, but when they support you with donor funds, there are other things that they expect you to also do that has the ability to divert your attention from the cause sometimes. But because this advocacy you've done was probably from your pocket or the support of your friends, you know, you probably now begin to see a need of setting up an organization so that you become an executive director or a CEO, right? You started collecting grants. Let's say you collected, they gave you $50,000. $50,000 in Nigerian naira currently multiplied by 720 is big money. Do you understand? You know, there's a way these things, you know, begins to happen, and you know, you begin to deviate from serving community to begin to serve yourself. Some of these things I'm sharing are not popular, right? A whole lot of people will not say these things to you guys, but I know it's the truth. I'm in the system. It's the truth, right? The moment you push an advocacy and bam, your advocacy gets to the limelight, bam, the next thing the donors are coming, you know, or you submit a proposal, bam, they say this guy is the next big thing that is happening to the civil society space. You begin to get money. The moment you begin to get money, your attention is going to be divided, right? And it's the truth. So if you go back to the dimensions of advocacy, I said the first level is for the people. The second level is with the people. The third level is when the people begin to advocate for themselves. If you can stay on that, inspiring the people to advocate for themselves, even when your donors come and gives you money, if you can stay on that alone, what you would have done is that you would have gotten yourself immune from being compromised by whatsoever, you know, to drive a process where you can see communities taking actions for themselves. So the trust, the reliance is not on you. The reliance is on the people who are the ones who are supposed to benefit from your advocacy. You understand? So you have to do that, right? So instead of we concentrating on seeing how to push people out of advocacy, yeah, you can do that, but I think it's counterproductive. You know, I cannot sit down there and come and tell you, this one is a fake advocate, this one is a good advocate, this one is a no. I don't have that time to do that. The only people I see are the people that I have encountered on the field. And sincerely, one of the things I'll say to myself or anybody who cares listening, see, there are some people you should run away from. They're just trying to make a name for themselves. The moment they make that name for themselves, you know, they get off that. And also sometimes some other people, their realities change. We've seen advocates that have become politicians. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. It's not wrong in itself. It's not wrong, you know. And I remember when I told you guys about the activists, right? Activists make very terrible leaders. Some people should just be activists alone and not get into politics. Some people, because if they eventually become leaders, they mess up a whole lot of things. I can give you 2 examples. Number one, Kwame Nkrumah may not be popular, but Kwame Nkrumah led, you know, was a famous activist, West African Student Union, led to the independence of Ghana in 58, you know, from Ghana, Nigeria, other African countries. A few years later, he wants to perpetuate himself in power. That was the first coup in Ghana. Robert Mugabe, the same thing. Mugabe was a hero, you know, in Zimbabwe, an activist, you know, but Zimbabwe is almost nothing to write home about in economy. Museveni, you know, the man from Uganda, activists. These are activists that get into power and they mess up big time, right? You know. So I mean, let's take you. I hope I've been able to answer that question, though.
Okay, I believe you have. So before we get to Ifyok, one participant actually requested policy brief examples if they could get links to policy brief samples for this class. So let's get to Ifyok. Ifyok, please. All
right. So good evening. I would share some of those policy. I would share some with Lisa for her to share with the entire class. So please, Lisa, please follow up on that. I would share some of. Go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everybody. So I'm really enjoying your lecture. I really enjoyed the lecture. Very awesome. So I was cooking beans, but the beans has to wait. I'll take everything there. I said. Please, you said something that struck me. You said you'd have loved real life scenarios. Let me present one. Okay, I want to advocate for a community, right? So I go. You said I should get the people to come and advocate with me. I don't go on my own. I get them so that they can learn from me. And I'm trying to teach them integrity. I'm not collecting money. What if the opponents of the advocacy go behind my back? They call these community guys and push them an envelope. I don't know about it. These guys now become my opponents. They say, okay, calm down. You cannot cry more than be bereaved. What do I do?
My brother, you go back home and continue to cook your beans. I will tell you for free, man. You cannot save the people who do not want to save themselves. You see, you know, guys, and I said it. See, the quest for helping marginalized communities. It's not about personal aggrandizement. It shouldn't be about personal aggrandizement. The moment a community says no to you, see, go back home. Don't even waste your time, because there's nothing you can achieve without the active collaboration of communities. Except you find yourself in that situation yourself. Except that issue affects you, you understand. I would also say to you that even if some people in the community collect money, it is not everybody in the community that collects money. That's why the first step is for the community. When you're speaking for the community, you articulate the problem, you share with them the problem, carry them along, so that it now becomes with the community. So it's you and the community together advocating to the duty bearer. You understand? Until when they are strong enough, then you can leave them alone to advocate for themselves, which is the highest level. So if within this process, you discover that the community is even fighting you, okay, it's not by force. So it's as if we would move to another thing or we'll go to somewhere else. Because quite sincerely, even on my work, part of the ethos of my responsibility on my job is the fact that the moment I get into a community and I speak with the community governance structure and they do not accept us, we have to leave. Because two things: number one, my security cannot be guaranteed in that community. Number two, anything can happen. The police can harass me, anything can happen. So I have to leave. I'm not a hero. I'm not. An advocate, first of all, is not a hero. He doesn't wear capes. The community may celebrate you when they see breakthroughs, but do not even let those things stop you. Do not let those breakthroughs, hinder you from moving, right? So I think it's very important to strike this balance, right? That, see, guys, if the community has collected money, it is them that would suffer. You can establish also this fact that, see, the moment you take money from these politicians, this is the reality. They would expect, see, they know they tell blind man here in the fall. No, everybody go collect. Guys who want to take B. So, my brother, the moment the community says no to you for whatever reason, please don't try to be a hero. Just move on. Just move on. You have other things to do, with your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Busayo. We really had a very, very informative, insightful lecture with you today. We really appreciate this. And on behalf of the cohort and the Electoral College of Nigeria, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. We'll look forward, we'll keep nursing our relationship with you, connections and partnership with you. And we hope that we would actually have you back here again, the next cohort, at least before the year runs out. So I want to say, yes, we have come to the end of the lectures today. Participants also want to have Mr. Busayo's email address so that they can actually reach out to you. Aside the link for samples of policy briefs. So please, we would need your those information maybe at you already have it there. Thank you, sir. So now classes will be adjourned till Friday for the next class as we continue the class. So thank you all. Thank you very much, participants, for staying till the end, even though we have some people leaving and they don't know what they lose when they leave like this. But thank you for everyone that has stayed. Please, let's make it an habit to stay through till the end, because most information you think you have, most of them you don't have fully. Let's stay true till the end. So thank you so much. Have a blessed week ahead of you, and good night, everyone.